Hello and welcome to a brand new series of Snooker Vodcast with me, Andy Goldstein. My guest today is the second youngest snooker champion of all time and went on to become one of only a handful of Triple Crown winners. I am, of course, talking about the wonderful magician, Shaun Murphy. Shaun, hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Andy?
I'm good, very well. How are you enjoying lockdown at the moment?
Yeah, I think enjoying's a stretch, isn't it? But just we're all in this situation together, aren't we? That's the thing. I think it's the same for everyone, and you just got to get through it the best you can, and keep watching those updates and staying safe, like trying to stay out of everyone's way.
Well, listen, I've got you for half an hour. We're going to talk about all your career and all your ups and downs, and of course, that time you became world champion, the second youngest one ever. But before we talk about your career as a professional, I want to talk about you as a kid growing up. Were you always going to be a snooker player? Did you always have that talent as a young kid?
I mean, I took to it straight away. Like I had no interest in it whatsoever, and until Santa brought me a table. Like I didn't have any. We didn't know what the game was until I saw the table. But once I connected with it, once I sort of started understanding it, then it just took over mine and everyone in the family's life. It became that was it, and it was practice every day. It was the club each night after school. All sorts. It just became that was what our life was about. Like, there's a picture somewhere in my mum's scrapbook from the Boxing Day, the day after, where I actually look like a little snooker player, and I've obviously been playing a day. My elbow was in the right place, and my bridge was in the right place, and you just think, like, what was that about? But I think wasn't that long after that I made a 50-something break on that little table, and apparently my dad went downstairs and said to my mum, like, this is weird, that's not normal, that. And then we very quickly progressed on to sort of proper full-size tables. I heard that Ronnie had made his first century when he was 10, and I said, right, I'd love to try and do that myself. And 2 weeks after turning 10, I made a 1-2-7 against him in the club, just peering over the edge of the table, But I think that's probably why I turned out to be a decent rest player, when I was that age. Every other shot was with the rest.
And as a kid growing up, who were your heroes in the snooker world?
Yeah, I mean, I watched everything. Like, if I could find a TV free or videos at car boot sales or whatever it was, I watched it all. But I think out of them all, Davis was the one who I sort of looked to as my, I'd love to, if I could do a 10th of what you've achieved, I'd consider that to be, a good career,
Away from snooker just for a moment, but still sticking with you as a kid, you had quite a difficult upbringing, didn't you? What was home life like for you growing up?
Yeah, it was tough. I think there's a big misconception that I come from a, very well-to-do, sort of well-off background and had everything my own way, and that's completely wrong. My parents did separate in my mid-teens, but before that, we'd gone through some turbulent times as a family financially. Life from being sort of 8 years of age was car boot sales on a Sunday, auction things on a Thursday, trying to nick a few quid here or there. I was playing in snooker tournaments, and we were using that cash to, trying to just keep everything afloat. Things were very, very difficult for us as a family. But, the sort of me, my mum and my dad, even though I was a child, we were all in it together, really. And later on, we sort of progressed. We got out of that sort of mess, if you like, and the big change for us came when I was 12, and Doc Martens, who were a local company, they were based, obviously a worldwide company, but they were based in the town next to where I lived. They supported a lot of local sports people and Rushden Diamonds Football Club, and they said, "Oh, we'd really like to try and support you." But for their support, which lasted 3 or 4 years, I just wouldn't be sat here talking to you today. There was lots of help along the way, hour after hour in clubs and traveling the country. But if it hadn't have been for Max Griggs, who was the sort of patriarch of that company, if he hadn't have stepped in and said, "We'd like to help," just wouldn't be sat here.
Did you see snooker as a bit of an escape for you from your home life?
Yeah, without question. Yeah, absolutely. When we got to the club, everything away, everything else in life sort of fell away, and any troubles we had, any difficulties we had, they just vanished, and they were replaced with snooker trouble. Why couldn't I make it? Why putting the white in the right play and all of that stuff? But it was definitely escapism. And while I was sat in school, I would be sat there imagining breaks and looking at the board and working out how I could pop that word into that pocket and all this. I just had no interest at school, and that was obviously then shown. I left school at 13. I never went back after year 9. That was me. That was me done.
Were you at that moment? Were you always going to be a snooker player? Or did you have other ideas of where you were going
to?
No,
that was it. That was it. There was no safety net. There was no second ideas. I actually remember, what do they call it now? Where like a careers officer comes into school, and you have that day where you go to someone's office, and they say, now, what would you like to be when you leave school? How do you see this planning with your GCSEs? And you sat and this, that, and the other. And I just looked at this woman and I said, no, I'm going to be a snooker player. And she said, yeah, but I know that, but what about this, that? And I said, no, you don't understand. I said, all I'm interested in doing is being a snooker. Anyway, she called for the head of PE, was a guy called Mr. Perkins. And he and I got on really well. And she said, listen, I'm having a bit of trouble with this one. I can't get through to him. And he said, yeah, no, he's interested in his snooker. We've tried to tell him as well. And that was that. And I actually saw this guy, Mr. Perkins, just a few months after winning the Worlds in 2005. And we met in the pub and we had a few beers. It was good times.
Oh, that sounds. I had the same conversation with my careers advisor. Genuinely, I said snooker player, and they laughed at me like they laughed at you. But look at me now. I'm always there on finals day. So
you're more consistent than me.
Yeah. So listen, when you turned pro, how old were you? What was your game like as an amateur? Were you a top amateur? And was it just a matter of time before you turned pro then?
Yeah, my amateur career was a funny one because it didn't really happen. I played on the juniors. I was in any junior event or any prime event that was happening. I was in it. And then when I was 15, I turned pro, and I think what WPBSA have made 2 exceptions for people in the past, because you were supposed to be 16. I think myself and Ronnie have had that dispensation given to us. And I actually have never got to the bottom of how and why that was given, because of tobacco sponsorship, you had to be 16 to be on the tour. And never actually got to the bottom of why I was allowed on the tour before I was 16. I remember celebrating my 16th birthday at Plymouth Pavilions, and all the ushers had got me a cake, and it was just before or just after a game, so I remember that. But I don't really know why I was allowed to get through that. It certainly wasn't anything. I didn't have anything to do with it. We applied to be allowed to join the tour, and that was that.
And you obviously had doubts about whether or not you're going to make it to the very top, because you turn pro at a very young age. You then fall off the tour, and then when you come back on, as I mentioned at the top of our chat, it's a great story, and I'm going to ask you to tell it now, about how you thought, qualifying for the World Championships in the year you ironically went on to win it in 2005. You thought, right, if it doesn't happen now, I need a complete career change.
The season we're talking about, 4-5, I was working with Steve Prest, who's sadly no longer with us. And we were working so hard, 3-4 times a week, driving hundreds of miles to see each other, practicing for 10, 11 hours a day. And we were going to all the matches in the qualifiers and just not getting anywhere. And I had a really bad beat in the China Open qualifier. I think I can never remember. It was either Rob Milkins or it was Gerard Green. And I can't remember who it was. And at 4 each, I had whoever the player was snookered on 3 reds. And I was sort of 45 ahead or something. And whoever it was fluked a red and dished. And on the way home, I said to Steve, that's it. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And we didn't speak all the way home. And later that night, I confirmed it. I said to him, I'm finished with this game. I'm just not. It hasn't worked out. Tried my best, really tried, did everything that was asked of me, left school, practiced hard every single day, sacrificed a lot of friendships, this, that, and the other, moved across the country. But it just hasn't worked. It doesn't work for everyone, and it hasn't worked for me. And he said, well, listen, you've paid your entry fee, enter the tournament, play it, don't waste the 700 quid, and see what happens. And I wasn't for it. I was like, nah, Steve, no, I'm not bothering. And I actually went to the Mercedes dealership in Sheffield, where I lived at the time, and went and got a job. And the MD of the place was like, well, listen, do this snooker thing. And as and when it doesn't work.
As what? A car salesman?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you've got the job. I think you'd be good at the job, blah, blah, blah. I know you're keen on this snooker rubbish. I think that's what, get this snooker out of the way. And, we'll see, just see you when we see you, like, come in, sort of start after the World Champs. Steve then convinced me even more to play, and I practiced and this, that, and the other. And I did win the 2 qualifiers, and then found myself at the Crucible. And of course, the rest is history, like.
And then, of course, you went on to become world champion at the age of 22. Is that the pinnacle of your career, for obvious reasons? But does it get any better than that, or is that it?
I suppose, if I'm being completely honest, I think winning the Masters in 15 and completing that Triple Crown set was a bigger moment for me.
Wow.
Because I understand and understood what it meant. Whereas at 22, winning the world, didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't understand how big a deal it was. I did know that if I won, I'd be the second youngest. But I think when you're young, you don't really think about stuff. You're not really taking on board that information. Let everyone else talk about it, and I just sort of carried on potting the balls and going for mental shots. And luckily for me, they all went in for that fortnight. But yeah, I didn't really think about it. That's why I've said I'd love to win it again, to try and sort of savour it a bit more now, obviously as an adult and everything that goes with that. Because at 22, I didn't really savour it much. I don't remember much of it.
Okay. Well, listen, we're going to have a quick break. When we come back, we'll get more from the Mercedes salesman. If you want to buy a car, he's your man, the magician Shaun Murphy, right after this. And well, welcome back to part 2 of a brand new series of Snooker Vodcast. My guest today is the 2005 champion of the world, Shaun Murphy. And just before the break, we were talking about when he managed to climb that hill. Shaun, when you became world champion, what was it like the following season? Because, of course, it's something that you've never experienced. You're being announced into every match as champion of the world, and everyone wants to play you, and everyone wants to beat you as well. And on top of that, you've become a household name. How did you deal with all of that?
Certainly where I come from, the village I grew up in, Earthlinborough in Northamptonshire, things like that just don't happen to people from those types of places. It just doesn't happen. It's things we read about. It's things we saw on TV. These people were on the news. It didn't happen to us. And didn't really know how to handle any of it. Didn't really know what invite to say yes to and to turn down to, managers, agents, sharks, who's trying to take you, who wants to actually look after you. How much should you be paying a manager? How much percentage of this, that, should you be sponsored by this company? All of this type of stuff. And meanwhile, all of those things are distracting you from what you're actually good at. The only thing you're good at, as it happened. And, that sort of tells in your results. I'd love to get in a time machine and go back to that year and have a quiet word with myself and just say, listen, leave all that stuff there. It'll all take care of itself. You go back to the snooker club and practice and try to win as many of these tournaments as you can. That would have been I wish someone had given me that sort of talk, but they didn't. And unfortunately, for me, that's just the way that was.
You got to 2 other world finals. In 2009, you got beat against John Higgins 18-9 quite convincingly. And in 2015, you lost to your good pal Stuart Bingham 18-15. Tell me a bit about both of those finals. Which one was harder to take than the other, and which one do you think you perhaps maybe had more of a chance to become world champion for the second time in?
Probably with more disappointment at the 09 loss to John, because I didn't really feature in the match. I think we were 4 each after the first session. And from then on, I allowed him to run off into the distance. And he exposed the weaknesses in my safety game and defensive game, and just completely dismantled me. And I think I look back at that and go, yeah, just ran out of steam there and just wasn't clever enough to compete with somebody at that level. The 15 final, I think out of the 33 frames that were played, there was like 29 or 30 breaks over 50 or 60. It was a very high standard match. And like, you know, I shook his hand and was genuinely pleased for him. You know, it was a great match of snooker. And I don't really look back at that with any regrets. I'm more disappointed about the 09 final because, as I say, these opportunities to win that tournament don't come round all the time. And I didn't really take part in that game.
You talked before the break about what was the most important moment in your career, and I thought it was going to be when you became champion of the world. But you said that it was when you became Masters champion in 2015. You absolutely tonked Neil Robertson in the final 10-2. But that, of course, meant you became, I think, one of only 10 players at the time to be the Triple Crown winner. And you were old enough to understand and appreciate it a bit more. So just tell us a bit more about that feeling, because I think even if you hadn't won the UK and the world before it, as a snooker fan, to become Masters champion is up there with, of course, one of the best accolades you can ever achieve.
You know, I'd gone to the Masters for 7 years with that pressure on my shoulder of this is the one I need to win. It's not peak. It's not just playing well and trying to win a trophy every now and again. This is the tournament. And it's very, very hard to peak for a specific event. But somehow, by hook or by crook, you know, off the back of nothing. I think the previous event I'd lost in the UK Championships early. You know, I don't think I'd showed any form really going into that tournament. But all the stars aligned that week, and you know, I gave everything I had in the final. It was only a few years before I'd lost to Neil in the final there itself anyway, so I knew exactly how hard that was going to be. And I suppose that only added to the pressure really, because I'd been to the final and squandered the chance to complete the set 3 or 4 years prior to that. So, you know, that added to it. But I think I was so pleased. I think it was Elaine's first time to a tournament that week. It was also, weirdly, it was also my mother's first time watching me play live after all those years. And I think I said during the presentation, like, you know, it isn't like this every week. And so I've been proven to be right. You know, the highs and lows of sport are just incredible. I think snooker probably is on its own with that.
Another great event you have was in 2017, the Champion of Champions. You beat O'Sullivan in the final 10-8. What did that mean to win such a big competition and beat an in-form O'Sullivan in the final as well?
Yeah, I think I look back at that as a real top moment in my career because, you know, I played well in the whole tournament, not just the final, but I played well across that. And of course, that's an event that you have to win your place in. You know, no one gets given a place in that. So it was a really good win. I think looking back at the final, I think when I got to sort of only needing one more frame, Ronnie seemed to just go on a mission, and everything he looked at went in for about 45 minutes to an hour. And before I knew where I was sat in my chair thinking, geez, like, you know, if he wins one more frame, we're into a decider. How have we ended up here? Because I think I was 9-4 ahead at one stage or something like that. And he just played snooker from the gods for about, as I say, an hour. And in the end, I think the overriding feeling was relief because I got a chance to steal the frame and took it and, you know, managed to take the trophy. I think that season where I won the Champion of Champions, I think I got to 5 finals that season. And people talk about it as a barren period. But I suppose that's probably a backhanded compliment, really. You know, ultimately there are a lot of players who they give their back teeth for a season like that. But as I say, going back to how I was brought up as a child, you know, it wasn't about finishing second and, you know, the runners-up medal and didn't you have a great week? That just wasn't the way I was taught. And I've always said I would swap that consistency. I'd love to delete that word from the dictionary and just take the trophies. So this season, having won 2 ranking events in a season for me is quite big. That's quite a big development for me. Now, for a lot of players, that's standard. But for me, that's been quite a thing because the 9 ranking events that I've won in my career have spanned my career. Whereas you see people like your Judd Trumps and O'Sullivans, Hendrys, Selbys, you know, Roberts, they're winning multiple events per season. And, you know, just for the first time in my life, it was quite nice to step into that circle with them.
Let me ask you then, because of course, you know, you have had a good season so far. You've not long got married to Elaine. You've moved to Ireland. You've got two wonderful children. Has all that lifestyle, has it maybe changed how you're playing on the table? Has it maybe changed how you approach the game?
I think it's changed in a lot of ways. I think I'm a lot better at dealing with defeats now than I ever was. I think because you come home to a family, and certainly with the two young kids, they don't allow you the freedom of sulking and moping around for a few days. You're not allowed to do that. So it's, by the time I make the journey home and I'm here, drop the bags at the door and turn the key in the door, then you've got to be, fun daddy. It spurred me on to get out and get practicing even harder. As everyone, back working with Chris Henry now for a good year or so, and we're really trying to, get back to where we were in 15, where we felt we were playing as good as anyone, and try and get back there and go past if we can.
Okay. And the last question: one thing you'd still like to achieve in your career would be what, Shaun?
Well, when I was a kid, I set myself 3 goals. One was to be world champion. One was to own a Mercedes-Benz, and one was to be world number 1. And I've achieved 2 of those things. I've never actually been number 1 in the rankings, and it would be a real feat of it. Bearing in mind how far everyone else is ahead of, Selby was miles ahead. He got caught, and now Trump's just like sailed off into the distance. It would be a real feat to catch them. But that was a goal I set when I was 10 years of age, and it's still something that I'm trying to achieve now. I
like, even at the age of 10, you still had something in your mind to do with the Mercedes car. Quite like that.
Yeah.
Listen, Shaun, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I know we know you as the magician, but I think you should be called the salesman. Maybe the car salesman will be a perfect nickname. I hope to see you back on the snooker circuit sooner rather than later. I'm sure we will. I'm sure this will all be over very soon. But in the meantime, thanks for your time. It's been a real pleasure, Shaun.
Cheers. Stay safe.
There you go, the wonderful Shaun Murphy. You've been watching one of many series of Snooker Vodcasts with me, Andy Goldstein. There's loads more to catch on Eurosport, and you can download them as a podcast as well. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.